Well, hello. Welcome to English Cafe. I'm Paul Preston. And today I want to talk about Zoom. Have you been invited to a Zoom party recently? Have you heard of any Zoom bombing going on? Well, you probably have heard of Zoom. Zoom is an online meeting software, I guess, application that you can use to talk to people in virtual meetings or whatever virtual situation. And more, people are using Zoom to stay in contact with each other, especially during lockdowns and quarantines and other issues with the coronavirus or COVID-19, as it's also known. So Zoom has become very, very popular. Other technologies, I think, are popular as well, but for some reason, Zoom really has some sticking power, and I think it's because of the name. This is not unique in English to use a brand name to actually enter the conversation, enter the language. Examples: Google. So I Googled it means I searched for it on Google. Kleenex is an old one, referring to tissues. The company Kleenex was a company that made popular facial tissues, and so they became known as Kleenex. Xeroxing something used to mean to copy it using a copy machine. And so we'd say Xerox, not so much anymore, but these words and many others are brand names, but they came into the language for to express a certain idea. And Zoom is maybe the latest one of these because of all the virtual meetings that we have to do now because of the pandemic. So Zoom party? Well, I got invited to a Zoom party a couple weeks ago. It was a Zoom birthday party, and I don't know how many people were there, but more than enough. And everybody was expected to surprise the guest and sing happy birthday. So we did, but it must have been terrible because all of the video was out of sync. All of the the connections were not very good. Some people had delays. Some people were louder than others. Some people were quiet. All of the typical problems with virtual meetings, of course, were happening in that birthday party. So I can only assume that happy birthday sounded really terrible. At least it did from my end. But still, it was the thought that counted, and the person who was being sung to, whose birthday it was very happy to have the experience. However, that Zoom party didn't last very long because 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes after singing, pretty much everybody signed off. It was very hard to communicate beyond that because there's so many people, and it's really hard to have a regular sort of party dynamic on Zoom. Well, naturally, this is true. This is the kind of thing that doesn't go well in an online virtual sense. Of course, virtual meetings are a little bit better because they're more structured and they sort of have more organization. So, it makes more sense. But a Zoom party, pretty tough. Zoom bombing, I mentioned before, that's when an uninvited guest comes to your party. And this was a problem right at the beginning because a lot of people were not using passwords. They were not careful with their meeting invitations, etc. So they would get in the hands of sometimes some pretty bad people who would, they'd enter the Zoom meeting and they would put terrible pictures online, or they would they would say terrible things, whatever. You know, it was pretty awful. So this was Zoom bombing. Somebody who came into your meeting wasn't really welcome, or you didn't even know they were there. That was a Zoom bomb. I hope it's happening less, but I suppose it's still happening because, well, you know, with technology comes the people who take advantage of or manipulate or just generally sort of damage, I guess, the technology. That's being human, I suppose. So that's all I have to say about Zoom. It's pretty interesting, really, how popular it's become, and I suppose it's worth it because it's a great way to get work done. It's a great way to communicate with coworkers, and it's really great to communicate with friends on a one-to-one basis. So, hey, during this time, it's a fantastic thing. But probably we'll all be really, really happy when we can sort of just go back and be with our friends and be in parties and do those things that we used to do. I'm sure we'll be able to soon. But in the meantime, I hope you're studying English, keeping your brain sharp, and I hope that you'll join me again next week for the next episode of English Cafe. Thanks a lot. This has been Paul Preston from Venture English and English Cafe. Bye-bye, everybody.